Welcome back. It's November 18th. This is Stephen Wolf for Lone Bulwark News. Today, I'm going to talk about a little bit about China, a little bit about Germany, and then of the great country of the United States. So first, China. So as we saw in the Cold War between the USSR and the US, a lot of the contention between the two wasn't what was centered on land outside of those two countries. It was centered on these other countries, Southeast Asia, East Asia, Latin America, and elsewhere. Something analogous is happening between the United States and China. And it's centered on places like Africa and Southeast Asia, but also Latin America. So Latin America has been primarily under the influence of the United States for hundreds of years. And some people are saying now that there has been, for a little while, some indifference towards that. And we've focused too much on narcotics and immigration, or at least we focused on those to the neglect of other problems. And one of those problems is China exploiting our indifference. So China has invested $286 billion in projects in Latin America. And these are primarily, of course, projects that benefit China, and in mines, in ports, and other infrastructure. And so this has been what China is trying to do is to gain not only economic benefit, but also political influence, because usually if you have economic ties between the country, the stronger country can then create strong political influence over that country, which can be counter to the United States. It appears to me, at least, that there is a zero-sum situation. The more China influence, the less U.S. influence. The more U.S. influence, the less China influence. So a lot of times interests can converge and there not be a zero-sum situation. But at least right now, it appears that there is a zero-sum situation. But now they're saying again that it's due to U.S. indifference, which doesn't surprise me. We care a lot about immigration and narcotics. But now China's gaining influence. Recently, you probably saw that Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, on Twitter, he was beat up like crazy for this, but he announced that there was a U.S. project to provide subway trains or trains for Lima, Peru. Now, it turns out, as a community note said, I don't know, I'm assuming that's right, that it's not actually funded. Basically, they sold, the Bay Area in California sold some old trains to Lima, Peru for them to build their infrastructure. And it makes sense why they would announce that now, actually, because there is a Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation meeting, or a Group of 20 summit that's actually meeting in Lima, Peru. So it's trying to show to Latin America that the U.S. is still interested in the development of Latin America. And so, apart from whatever you think about should we be focusing on that, it is a function of the Secretary of State to do foreign relations. So it's one thing if someone else in the Biden administration was focusing on that. But it makes sense for the Secretary of State, but also that we've devoted a lot of attention to foreign countries and not our own. But anyway, apart from all that, what you see, what I think is happening, is you have South and Central America they know that China and the U.S. are in this kind of battle for influence. And what's rational for these countries to do is just kind of work with that. You get free stuff from China and you get free stuff from the United States, and you do it to build up your infrastructure. And so they're playing both sides because they know both sides are contending for influence. But in the end, someone is going to win out. And so what the U.S. is going, I think what the U.S. is going to do, they're going to recognize this and they're going to shift their influence. So instead of having indifference, they're going to seek stronger economic ties. Now, usually these projects, they involve financing. So it's not like it's not like China's giving them money. It's on very favorable terms. And there's several reasons for that. One, you want the influence. So you give favorable, U.S. and China are incentivized to give favorable terms for this funding. But also that Latin America, especially in South America, has been notorious in taking on debt and then being unable to pay it back, and then sometimes even unilaterally canceling the debt, which harms their credit rating, and also drives inflation really high. And so there are reasons why you want the favorable funding, and of course they're playing both sides, and so it's just rational for them to pursue that. There is, I said, there's a summit. One of the motivations for China is to isolate Taiwan. So remember, Taiwan is a country, kind of. The US policy on this is kind of contradictory and ambiguous, but most countries in the world do not recognize Taiwan as a sovereign country. I think my first episode I talked about this. I won't go back into it, but China has an interest in playing down and isolating Taiwan. Now, several countries in the Caribbean and in South America have recognized Taiwan as a sovereign country. I believe there were at one point 11 countries that had official diplomatic ties with Taiwan. Well, having influence in South America, that is China having influence, has led to a few of them to actually back out of that. So they've de-recognized Taiwan, and they no longer have official diplomatic relations with them. So this has the effect of isolating Taiwan further, which is a central focus of China, because China desperately wants Taiwan to come back as a Chinese country, even though Taiwan became its own country before the communism took over. But anyway, there is all that history. You can look it up for yourself. But China has been effective in that regard. There still are problems with China influencing South America because of shoddy construction. In the past, they had bad funding deals that actually did harm them, Latin America financially. But now China's got its act together, and now they're doing doing smart funding and with favorable terms to these countries. So um, let's see. In this summit, Biden's going to be there, which one, I'm not sure how effective Biden is just as a person speaking. So he's not going to have that influence. And also, he's kind of a lame duck president because his party lost the election. So no one really cares because it's just, a couple months before he leaves office and it's Trump. Everyone's focus is now on what Trump is going to do. So Trump wants to put tariffs almost like across the board, targeted in a way by percentage. I think he's talked about 10-20% for Europe, and I think as much as like 60% for China. Now, so this could, it can harm these economies. It definitely will harm the European economy, and it will harm China because everyone except the U.S. economy, despite what you heard in the election and all that, the U.S. economy is actually doing fairly good. At least that's my understanding. And so the U.S. can then afford to do these tariffs on these economies that are kind of struggling. China has had a declining economy per GDP. I think it's at 4%, which is historically low because only 10 something years ago they had 10% increase in GDP. Europe is like Germany was just got out of a recession, will likely go into a recession soon. UK, of course, they're all imploding because they're ideological morons, and they could actually fix their economy, but they're moronic, as we'll talk about in the next one. But anyway, Trump does these tariffs. One of the possible negative effects of tariffs is it actually bring these countries closer to China because then it makes Chinese economic cooperation more attractive, obviously, because now you have the U.S. is being hostile through tariffs, and so it's going to move over to China. Now, if the U.S. can overcome that, because despite the tariffs, you could still be a more favorable economic partner. So, one of the things, like I said, these guys are just going to play back and forth. So, one of the political issues that's going to, it's all we already saw it with the Blinken tweet. But when it comes out that Trump or any president is now authorizing money, funds or grants or whatever to these countries, that's going to be a political issue. It's going to be kind of you can just compare. It's like, why are we giving money to Lima, but we're not giving money to, apparently there's a Lima, Ohio. Like we're giving money to Peru, but not Ohio. We're giving it to Argentina, but not to Pennsylvania. And so it's going to be compared in that way. So, well, whatever the right answer is, I mean, I actually don't entirely know. It's a very complex issue as to whether or not we shouldn't or should do this, because America does enjoy a a broad influence in the world, but that comes with certain costs. I mean, if you're going to have an empire, the empire costs money. And so if we don't want the empire, well, then we pull back, don't have the empire. Well, guess what? China has aspirations to be the unipolar leader of the world. So there's a cost to that. We focus all our money inwardly as a domestic infrastructure, domestic development, while pulling back our engagement internationally. Well, then there is a void. Like this is the problem: is it doesn't just become a multipolar world. You now have a rising power in China who will then influence what they'll fill the void, and then China will have diplomatic power over all of Africa, diplomatic power over Latin America, and then diplomatic power over its own region, East and Southeast Asia. And what happens then? So now the U.S. is isolated. But anyway, I don't want to get too far. But it's a very complicated issue, and so we have to actually think about this, I guess, rationally. I don't know. It's we have to think about this as if we benefit from the empire, then the empire still requires costs. If we don't want the empire, well, there's a cost to that, in that we could be ourselves isolated and dominated by the Chinese. So it's something to think about rationally. In every policy, there's a benefit. In every policy, there's a cost. And so the idea of the American empire, do we want that or not want it? But anyway, so China growing, and so I think we'll see more and more if we pay attention. We'll see more and more of discussions with China and Latin America. But let's go to the next one, the German issue. All right, Germany. All right, so Germany is the strongest economy in Europe. And Germany, like other countries, is facing a fractious government, and the government collapses. So in these countries, when we talk about government, we don't talk like the U.S. When we say U.S. government, it's very kind of a fixed thing. We don't have new governments. We don't form governments. But in a lot of these parliamentary coalition countries, they form governments, and that's formed by, you have an election, and then there's a coalition that's formed between different parties if there isn't a majority party in power, and they form a government. That's what happens in France. That's what happens in Germany. Happens in Netherlands. Happens in the UK. Happens in many countries. They use language of the government collapses. If the U.S. government collapses, that's more significant than the German government collapsing, because of the way we understand that. But anyway, Germany's government has collapsed, and what that means is that the coalition, the governing coalition, has collapsed, and this is explained by the fact that what were once minor parties have now have significant electoral support, and this means that the traditional bigger kind of quote centrist parties, which could almost get majority or could sometimes get the majority of the vote, now have to work with usually two other parties to form a coalition. And those minor parties often are almost always very ideologically centered. So you have a Green Party, for example. Germany has a free market liberal party. And so Germany, the what's it called, the I forget what their major party is. It's like Christian Democrats, I think. Yeah, this party, it's kind of a center right party. It's a Christian Democrat party. It was cooperating with the Free Democratic Party, and the Free Democratic Party is like, think of it like a libertarian party. This was interesting is like the when we think of liberal, like a liberal free economic thing, that's actually not very popular in Europe. But they do have, every country has their laissez-faire pro free market party. Okay, so anyway, the German Christian Democrats were in a coalition with the Free Democratic Party, and that has essentially collapsed because they were not able to come together on the legislative agenda for it. And so now they will have a vote of no confidence, and then eventually they'll have to dissolve their parliament to have new elections. The same thing has happened in France. The same things happen in Netherlands. The same things happen in the UK. You have these minor parties. Often the right wing is actually taking a large share of the electorate, but none of these centrist parties want to work with the right. They don't want to form a coalition with the right because of like the post World War II consensus, which is that they're all Nazis or fascists or blah blah blah. You don't work with the right, but you can work with the left. That's kind of how these things are working. But as the right increases in electoral support, this is what you're going to see. You have governments that cannot effectively govern, especially at a very crazy time for Europe. As I said before, the Chinese economy is actually declining. Germany was in a recession. They got out of the recession, and it's expected they're going to go back into a recession soon. Germany also is a very export-driven country, and so that means they will be hurt tremendously by Trump's tariffs. And then add to this the NATO issue. So Trump is saying that if you don't, as a member of NATO, supply your required 3% of GDP to military efforts, which most of the NATO countries do not, then he's saying that we're going to pull support from you. There's Trump's threatened to leave NATO. He's also wants to end the war, the Russia-Ukraine war, as soon as possible through negotiation. Europe wants Ukraine to actually win. Germany's given like 30. They've given like I think 16 billion to Germany or to Ukraine. We've given multiple times more than that. But anyway, so Trump has said since the 80s that he doesn't like the U.S. being taken advantage of by these countries. Europe has these very generous welfare systems. They have strong labor laws, all these social safety nets. And guess who's funding their defense? Well, the United States is funding their defense. And so Trump and other people have said this for a long time, Pat Buchanan, that we're being taken advantage of, and they should supply their own defense. So you add to this for another thing to add to it is that over the last 10 years, 6.6 million people, migrants, they call them migrants, they're actually invaders, have entered into Germany, and Germany now accounts for a third of all asylum applications in Europe. Now, the reason why they account for a third of all asylum applications is that Germany is the most willing to grant it. There's a reason why these migrants don't stay in Greece. There's a reason why they don't stay in Poland. There's a reason why they don't stay in. I mean, actually, things might be changing for Italy, but there's reasons why they go to Germany, and that is because they are generous with these asylum claims. To the Wall Street Journal's credit, I was reading this. They have experienced, it says, a wave of crimes, including a spate of terrorist attacks committed by foreigners, according to police statistics. And get this, Germany is spending 30 billion euros, which is equivalent to about $32 billion each year on migrants. And that's just on the welfare benefits. So you add to that the crime and all the other social services of having more people. So this is just on welfare benefits. So it's probably tens of billions more that they're spending on these people. Yeah, Germany needs to get over its guilt. But that's the condition of Germany. Now, the same thing is true of France. Actually, France I think that they spend more on military in France, and they actually have a decent military, even though it's small. But anyway, so France is in a similar situation, though its economy is stronger. It's still got the migrant issue, but it will still, but I still don't think it's reached its 3% target. So that is by NATO treaty. They are bound by treaty to have 3%, and they've been in NATO since for decades. And Trump is finally calling them out on it, which I definitely appreciate. Trump has said he wouldn't protect NATO members who underspend on defense if they were attacked by Russia. So yeah, you've got these influence of forces. You've got their tax revenue is down because their economies are going down. They have these generous social safety nets that are not going away because once you offer a benefit, it's extremely difficult for to take it away. You've got increasing number of migrants who are taking social services and causing these third parties to rise up to make it hard to govern. Add to that, Trump is going to add tariffs. Add to that, Trump is going to say you need to provide your own defense. So Europe is in a sort of soft crisis, and it's going to be trouble. Like it's going to be trouble for them, and they're going to become less relevant. I was talking to this like with Hungarians. I was like when I was over there, and I was saying that like Europe, it's weird. Like literally the only two relevant countries are going to be the U.S. and China moving forward because Europe is declining, and this is really actually their own. This is their own fault because they are ideologically. How do you put it? Let's just say their wife has a boyfriend. Let's just put it that way. That is their problem, and they are ideologically aligned to like climate stuff. Even Starmer in the UK, with UK declining all across the board, they're like, let's do more environmental regulations. And then I said before in a different podcast that Germany, their energy costs are like 6 times more than the United States. And that's because of their own stupid environmental policies. Like, oh, nuclear power is bad. So we're going to take out nuclear power. And oh, by the way, now we're going to use all of Russia's natural gas to fund. And then it increases their prices. It's just wild. Like these are all self-caused. It's not like they were weak and they were under domination by stronger powers and just, the weak do what they must sort of thing. They're strong and they destroyed themselves. I mean, the US is doing something similar, but we're still strong economically at the very least. But Europe is literally destroying itself. And there are, I think, simple solutions in themselves that they just can't pass because they're ideologically screwed over. But anyway, that's enough of Europe. Let's switch back to the United States and talk about something a little closer to home. All right, in the United States, this is something you might not have heard of. It's kind of, I think it's interesting. You have various counties in the United States that are seeking to break away from their state. Now, this has been true for quite a while. I remember growing up in California in the '90s, hearing about splitting California in two or into three different, and so this has been happening for a while. But there actually has been, in a way, some progress in making it happen. So we go to Illinois, where you have these rural counties. Let's see how many of them. There are 102 counties in Illinois. That's a lot. 33 of them, 33 of the counties in Illinois have voted to break away from Illinois and call it New Illinois. And and the proposal is that all of Illinois except Cook County, which is where Chicago is, all of them would break away to start their own state and leave Cook County as the only as the remaining Illinois. All right. And so all the counties have voted for it, for this. In uh, Iroquois County, Illinois, 73% voted to break away. Now, this is basically a non-binding thing, but they have made a new step, which is they have a first draft of a new constitution, and their slogan is "Leave Illinois without moving." Right now, you have to feel for these guys. This is about what is it? 60% of the population of Illinois live in Chicago, and it's dominated by the worst sort of Democrats you can imagine. Right, this is where Obama came from. Um, while the rest of it, the 40% of the population of Illinois is dominated by that one county and that one city in the state. So you have to feel for these people, right? They're mainly conservative. Like if you drive through Illinois going up to Chicago, which I've done before, you're surrounded by rural conservatives, flag waving, love America sort of people, and yet they're dominated by a tightly packed, dense political machine up in Chicago. So that's happening. And it's also happening in California. Let's see, New California, It's declared that all the counties outside of Los Angeles, Bay Area, and Sacramento as independent. And they even named him the governor, the temporary governor of this. So that's happening. Let's see. It's also happening in this has been old. The old it's like New Idaho, or it's what is it? Yeah, Oregon. There's movements in Eastern Oregon to join Idaho, and they'd call it Greater Idaho. So this goes into yep, yeah, and so there have been counties there have voted for these things too, and so there is a growing movement of wanting to break away. You look at the map of New California; it's pretty hilarious. It's like the the only remaining. It's basically Los Angeles and then the Bay Area and then a little sliver of land that's going up to Sacramento. I guess that's on the Sacramento River going up to Sacramento. Um, is that Napa? Is Napa going to be in part of old California? That's where I'm from, Napa, California. But anyway, it's pretty funny. So I mean, if you just look at the voting maps, like red and blue for president, most of California in terms of landmass voted for Trump. So again, you have strong Democratic strongholds in the Bay Area, and then Los Angeles, and then like San Diego, where the rest of it then for the most part is red. And so are these people being represented by their state? Especially California is like the most bizarre left wing legislature you can imagine. Like that one guy named Weiner is like basically a pedophile, and he runs the legislature there. Is that his name, Weiner? I don't know. Probably doesn't matter. He's a wiener. All right. So that's happening now. In order for this to happen, ordinarily you'd have the state legislature would agree to it, and then in order to form a new state, it'd have to be approved by Congress, right? So U.S. Congress. Now, I guess it is a tricky sort of legal situation because there is precedent for Congress unilaterally declaring a state. So, for Virginia during the Civil War, West Virginia was able to form by unilaterally through act of Congress without the approval of Virginia because it was during the Civil War. But then you have like Maine broke away from Massachusetts, but that was agreed upon by the Massachusetts legislature and then formed, according to the Constitution for formation of a new state. So it's kind of like a tricky legal thing because all these states were recognized, given their boundaries, originally by U.S. Congress. So can they legally just unilaterally form a state out of that? I don't know. I don't know the legal complications of that. But anyway, ordinarily, you would get the approval of the state legislature. So with that in mind, most likely it's not going to happen anytime soon. But things have changed a lot in the last few years, and so you never know. At the very least, I like this. It's a hopeful sign to me because it shows that that Republicans are starting to assert themselves stronger. That they are willing to that they're willing to assert themselves and form their own governments, form their own constitutions, and push back against the left. I mean, it's all legal stuff. They're not breaking the law by doing this, but at the same time, it's using the law, it's obeying the law at the same time asserting themselves politically. And even if this doesn't pass, the spirit behind that is what is needed. That's what we need. We need that strong spirit so that we can assert ourselves and win politically. So, all right. Well, thank you for listening. That'll be enough for today. See you next time.